Buckle up, everybody, because today we're going deep on a story of survival against some crazy odds. We're going back to World War II, November 29th, 1943. It's a massive bombing raid over Bremen, Germany. Hundreds of B-17 bombers in the air that day. We're going to zero in on one bomber in particular, the Rikki Tikki Tavi, and we're going to focus on the tail gunner of that bomber, Gene Moran. This guy went through an absolute nightmare. His plane ripped apart, he falls from the sky, and he lives to tell the tale. But before we get to how all that happened, let's set the scene a little bit.
But you got to understand, Bremen was a really important target for the Allies. It was a major hub for shipbuilding and U-boat production. Knocking it out would deal a big blow to the whole German war machine. But that also meant the Germans protected it. It was super heavily defended, basically a death trap for bomber crews.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're Gene, crammed into the tail gunner position of this B-17, flying towards Bremen. And all of a sudden, German Bremen 110 fighters just appear out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But these weren't your average fighters either. They were armed with this new, terrifying weapon, 21-centimeter Werfer granite rockets.
Those things sound scary.
They were bad news. These BF-110s would attack head-on, launch these rockets from a distance. Smart tactic, really. Kept them out of range of the B-17's top and ball turrets. You know where most of the firepower was? In fact, the Rikki Tikki Tavi almost got nailed by one right off the bat. Pilot Linwood Langley just barely dodged one of those rockets, screaming right past the cockpit.
Oh, man, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, that was just the start, though. The rockets were just the first wave.
What do you mean?
Oh, yeah. After the rockets came the BF-109s and the Dill W-190s, the Butcher Bird, some of the best fighters the Germans had.
I've heard of those.
They swarmed the bombers. It turned the sky into this crazy mess of metal and fire.
And Gene's back there in the tail gunner seat with a front row seat to all this.
That's right.
I mean, how did guys like Gene deal with all of that?
It's hard to comprehend. Just picture it. The roar of the engines, the flak exploding all around. Those German 88-millimeter guns were no joke, accurate and deadly. And then you had the constant chatter on the intercom, trying to coordinate with your crew. While fighters are all over you, you need an insane focus to function. And even more courage.
Yeah, but it wasn't just the mental stress, right? These guys were dealing with extreme temperatures, G-forces that could knock you out, not to mention the chance of getting ripped apart by enemy fire.
You're absolutely right. And during all this chaos, Gene saw other bombers in his formation getting hit, spiraling down in flames. It's incredible any of them made it through.
It really is. So somehow the Rikki Tikki Tavi makes it through the bombing run, and they start to head back home. You'd think they'd catch a break after all that, right?
You would think so, wouldn't you? You'd think surviving that bombing run would be enough for one day. But for Gene and the crew of the Rikki Tikki Tavi, the danger wasn't over just yet. Not even close.
Okay, so the Rikki Tikki Tavi is heading home after the bombing run, but you were saying the danger wasn't over yet?
Nope. Just when the crew thought they might actually make it back, another wave of German fighters showed up.
Jeez.
These Luftwaffe pilots, they didn't mess around. They knew the bombers would be low on fuel and ammo, easy pickings. They hit the Rikki Tikki Tavi hard. And the bomber was already damaged, remember. It starts falling behind the formation.
Uh-oh. That's not good. You're basically a sitting duck if you can't keep up with the formation, right?
Exactly. A lone B-17 against a whole bunch of German fighters. Not a good place to be. All those guns on a B-17, they're meant to work together. You create this overlapping field of fire. But by yourself, you're basically defenseless.
So what happened to the Rikki Tikki Tavi then?
They put up a fight, but they were outnumbered. The Rikki Tikki Tavi was taking fire from all sides, and Gene back in his tail gunner spot, he sees his best friend get killed right in front of him. The ball turret gunner, Wilbert Pee Wee Provost.
Oh, man.
I can't even imagine seeing something like that. Your plane's being shot to pieces, your friend's gone. Must have been horrifying.
So what about Gene? Did he at least manage to bail out?
Well, this is where things get really strange. As the Rikki Tikki Tavi is being ripped apart, this German B-109 pulls up alongside Gene's tail section.
Wait, really?
And get this. The German pilot signals for Gene to bail out.
He's letting him surrender in the middle of a dogfight.
It does seem crazy, right? But you have to understand, there were these moments of strange chivalry in the air war, almost like knightly conduct. Some pilots on both sides, they recognized the danger they both faced, and they kind of developed this code of honor.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so in this case, it seems like the German pilot, he saw that Gene was trapped and offered him a way out.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. But unfortunately, this moment of humanity didn't last long.
What happened?
Another crew member on the Rikki Tikki Tavi, he sees the German fighter right there, and he opens fire.
No way.
We don't know who fired the shot. But that was it for Gene's chance of surrender.
That's
It is. The German pilot, he's obviously angry now. Like, his trust was betrayed. He rejoins the attack. And the German fighters, they just unleash everything they have, focusing on the tail section where Gene is.
So is that it then? Is Gene killed?
You're not going to believe what happens next.
What?
Rikki Tikki Tavi is literally ripped apart by the German fighters. And in all the chaos, the tail section breaks off, with Gene still inside.
Hold on, the tail section just breaks off. What happens to a person when that happens?
I mean, put yourself in Gene's shoes for a second. You're strapped into this tail gunner position, and suddenly, you're not in a plane anymore. You're in this broken tail section, spinning out of control, thousands of feet in the air. The noise, the G-forces, I can't imagine. Just surviving the tail breaking off is crazy enough, but then you've got to deal with the fall.
Yeah, that's what I don't get. How do you survive a fall like that?
Well, that's the craziest part of this whole story. It's a combination of luck and some serious human will to live.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this. This guy is falling to earth in a broken tail section. How does anyone survive something like that?
It's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? We actually have accounts from people who were on the ground. They saw the tail section spinning as it fell. Gene's own crewmate, the navigator Jesse Orison, he managed to bail out just before. And he saw it happen. Imagine watching your friend fall like that.
Oh, man, I bet that was terrifying. And it wasn't just falling straight down either, was it? You said it was spinning. What kind of forces does that put on a human body?
Massive forces. Think about the centrifugal force. Plus, Gene was already hurt pretty bad from the attack. Broken bones, fractured skull. It's amazing he didn't pass out.
I read somewhere that he was pinned to his seat by the force of the spin, almost like his body was being held together by physics.
It's possible. Maybe that force that was trying to tear the tail apart actually helped to stabilize him and prevented more injuries.
So the spin might have helped him survive.
It's wild, isn't it? Yeah.
It's crazy, but you gotta admit there was a lot of luck involved too, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a situation where the slightest change in anything, the angle of the spin, the terrain below, the wind, anything could have meant the difference between life and death.
Yeah, that's true. It makes you realize how fragile life really is. So walk me through those last few moments. What happened when the tail section finally hit the ground?
Well, people who saw it said it slammed into a bunch of trees with incredible force.
Right there.
And those trees, they basically acted as a cushion. They absorbed some of the impact and slowed the tail section down.
So the trees saved him. If he'd hit the ground directly?
I don't think he would have made it.
But even after that crash, he wasn't out of the woods yet, was he?
No. He was still trapped in the wreckage, badly injured.
And he was able to crawl out
He did.
after everything he'd been through?
Pure adrenaline.
Yeah,
The will to live is pretty incredible.
it really is.
And luckily for Gene, he was found pretty quickly by some French workers from a nearby camp and some German soldiers.
So it could have been a lot worse if the wrong people found him. You know what's amazing to me?
What's that?
A Serbian doctor who was in the area, he actually performed surgery on Gene.
That's right.
A Serbian doctor
Wow.
treating an American airman in German-occupied France.
It's remarkable, isn't it? That doctor saved Gene's life.
He did.
Gene recovered from his physical injuries. But obviously he had some lasting psychological trauma. That's understandable.
And then to top it all off, he was reunited with Jesse Orison, the navigator who bailed out earlier.
It's an incredible story. It shows the bond that forms between these guys in combat. And thankfully, Gene's story didn't end there. His friend John Armbruster wrote a book about Gene's experience. It's called Tailspin.
I'll have to check that out. I think these stories are so important. They remind us of the courage and resilience of these guys who fought in the war. So before we wrap up, what are some key things you hope people take away from Gene's story?
Well, first of all, I think it shows the strength of the human spirit. Even when things seem hopeless, there's always a chance to survive. Gene's story also shows how important it is to share these experiences. It helps us remember the sacrifices that were made, and it can inspire others. And finally, I want people to think about what they would have done in Gene's situation.
That's a good point.
Would you have made the same choices?
Tough to say.
It is.
Well, this has been a wild ride. Gene's story is a reminder that even in the face of unbelievable odds, the human spirit can endure. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you on the next deep dive.